Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are in the preseason for the 2037 season. Going to hopefully get through the preseason and spring training in this episode. Been a relatively quiet off season for our Buffalo Wings. More departures than additions to the major league roster in particular. Unfortunately, because of our budgetary issues. That said, we do have a fair amount of capacity to add some talent at this point. The reason we aren't going to be looking for any long term commitments, however, is that the ace of our pitching staff, Alexis Barajas, is in his final arbitration eligible year, headed to free agency after this season. So we want to ensure that we've got a nice chunk of money available for this upcoming off season to ensure that we can get him locked up to hopefully a long-term deal to spend the rest of his prime with our Buffalo Wings. One comment that several of you have made to me over the years in the comments is that I don't use the waiver wire enough, and or you don't see me using the waiver wire enough. As I've mentioned in the comments to those comments in the past, I do use the waiver wire from time to time, and I do check it out from time to time. Probably not as consistently and aggressively as I should, but typically I don't find all that much interesting on the waiver wire, at least in terms of the players I'm looking for. Tend to have better luck in the Rule 5 draft and the trade market and free agency. But to address the concern that some of you have brought up, we'll take a quick look at the players, at least the top players available on the waiver wire right now. Jenna Rose Villegas, 23-year-old, not a bad personality, but that brutal control, I just have no interest in a player like that. David Corona, only 21 years old, but if he fully develops, and we've got very high scouting accuracy on him, he's borderline usable at a major league level, has some negative personality traits. Not all that interested in Mr. Corona. Giancarlos Fox, another pitching prospect who, if he fully develops, is borderline usable with some personality quirks. So those guys who are allegedly three of the most interesting on the waiver wire don't really interest me. I'll take a look at the whole waiver wire here, and you can see there's not too much out there. Could I bring a Carlos Betancourt into camp? I guess, but he's making $2 million a year. We picked 4 pitchers in the Rule 5 draft, all of whom I think I like better than Betancourt, so not really all that interested in him. Jim Martin just has brutal stuff. Not typically the type of guy I'd like. Derek McAfee. Again, he's a borderline guy. Never played in the majors. I kind of like the 4 pitchers we picked in the Rule 5 better than him. Catcher Hayden Dunhurst. Not bad defensively, but the guy can't hit. I mean, he hit 209, striking out every 3 at-bats in AAA last year. So to me, there's nothing that exciting in this crew of waiver wire players. I'll try to, and I do look at it. I might try to, if I remember, talk about it a little more in future episodes. But right now, nothing particularly interesting to me available on the waiver wire. And we've made it to the start of spring training. We've got 45 players in camp right now. Going to go with the 6-man rotation that we usually go with. Barajas, Shazier, and Estrada, again, our 1, 2, 3 starters. Cedro Ochoa moves up from the 5-starter role to the 4-starter role, with the fact that we moved on from longtime number 4 starter Jorge Carrillo this offseason, mainly to save money to eventually bring back Barajas. The youngster Alexis Mendoza is going to slot in as our number 5 starter, at least during spring training. And then Eddie Mosley, the left-handed veteran who we signed for a very small amount to hopefully be a long reliever and an occasional starter for us if we need him to be, is going to get an opportunity at least in the early days of this spring training to be our number 6 starter. And as we've talked about, we haven't done much this off-season. Taking a look here at the start of spring training is the free agents who are eligible. There's honestly not really anybody that I'm all excited to bring aboard. We will need to be filling out our minor league system. So this came up in a comment to a recent episode by Patrick DeBonis. Kind of wondered what our thought process was and what we think about when signing players to our minor league system for depth. And quite honestly, there's nothing particularly exciting or sophisticated about the way I go around trying to build a little bit of veteran quality and a little depth in the minor leagues. At this point in the beginning of spring training, really all I'm doing is looking for someone who might sign for a minor league contract. So in this case, we've got the starting pitcher, Brad Edge. He's wrecked physically. He does have some good personality traits that I like to see. Looks like he could certainly be a useful pitcher for us in AA or AAA. If we had a bunch of injuries, he could conceivably be a replacement level arm at the major league level. So I'll certainly go ahead and offer him a minor league contract. Andy Lara is a guy coming off with a torn UCL. Not going to bother signing a guy like him right now, even though he's only looking for a minor league contract. And you can see there's not a lot of talent available at this point with high-end potential. Quite honestly, I don't mind bringing on a few other players, but Caleb Killian fits the profile a bit. Looks like he's got high leadership, good loyalty, another guy who could be a useful arm in the minors, but he's 39 years old. Other than, ensuring that we've got a loaded team that just wins about everything, every game possible, doesn't really bring much to the table. Sean Haupt is a 24-year-old, not a big-time prospect, but he's a guy who, at least in terms of his age profile, kind of might be able to contribute at one of our lower-level minor league clubs, so we'll bring him on board. A lot more older players here. 34-year-old Jack Sullivan looks like he's got some pretty positive financial traits with the leader and the intelligence. A bit greedy, but he is popular in the clubhouse. He's just not a major leaguer or anything close to a major leaguer at this point. Sometimes I'll bring a guy like him on board because of the positive personality traits. But, even as a reliever in the minors, he's basically just a one-pitch guy with a fastball. Sure, he could be helpful in terms of, again, winning with a high-A club, but unless I get to the end of spring training and I need pitchers just to fill out those rosters, probably not someone that I would bring along. Ty Sherwood is a little younger, 28 years old. Don't necessarily love the outspoken and overbearing personality, but he's a guy who at least has a broad arsenal in terms of pitches, throws reasonably hard. Again, don't love that he's outspoken, but I've got so many good, strong personalities throughout my minor league system that I'm not worried about having one obnoxious, blathering person around. So we'll go ahead and offer him a minor league contract as well. Looking at the batters, there's honestly guys here who could potentially help us a bit at the major league level. We don't. Kyle Manzardo has been out there for a while, and he's certainly the best hitter available. The thing is, we just don't need another guy who's all offense, no speed, no defense, who has to be a first baseman or a DH. We've got plenty of those guys who I think have similar to potentially better batting profiles than Manzardo. So unlikely to bring him on board right now. Jackson Holliday, feel a little differently about him. He's a guy who could turn into a decent utility infielder for us. Also could give us a left-handed bat off the bench. Don't love some of those personality traits, but again, we've got a pretty strong clubhouse, so one guy who's low on leadership isn't going to tank our clubhouse. He's fragile in terms of his injury proneness, basically just a replacement level bat. He's marginal for somebody that I'd want to sign to a major league contract at this point. If I could sign him to a minor league contract with major league options and then stash him in AAA, that may be something to consider. And that's kind of what he's looking for. I don't even want to have to pay him $2.6 million, but if we can pay him $2 million, he won't go for $2 million. Actually, he will. He'll consider it. So, we're not making any commitment at all to him. He can opt out after 30 days, but he's the type of guy that I don't mind stashing in AAA. And if he happens to opt out, he opts out. If he decides that there's not a better option for him, he gives us some depth in AAA that if we, again, have some major injury issues, in this case in the infield, as opposed to what I was talking about earlier in terms of pitchers, he's a guy who could conceivably come up and spend a week or two on the roster and hopefully not embarrass us. Couple other guys to look at here. Victor Acosta is a guy who's not looking for a major league contract. Wouldn't mind having a guy like him who's respectable defensively, versatile defensively, and again, probably would not completely embarrass himself if he had to be up in the majors for a couple weeks. We'll offer a guy like that a minor league contract. Our old friend James Wood is out there. He is just an even bigger strikeout machine now, our scout thinks, than he has been in previous seasons with us. I bet he would be looking for a minor league contract with major league options. No, he's actually still looking for a pure major league contract. I was going to say I wouldn't even give him a minor league with major league options at this point, but we'll see, if he's still around 3 weeks from now and hasn't found a job and is willing to go into the minors, might consider bringing him on board. Andy Ricard, left fielder with a decent potential bat, but another guy who's really a corner outfielder or infielder and not good defensively. And he's got such negative personality traits and so many of them, not really a guy that I would want to bring around. Among the catchers, although arguably Gabriel Moreno and Bo Naylor, both 37 years old, look like they might have better bats. Campbell Smithwick, just with the good defense, is the type of guy I wouldn't mind bringing into our system, again, to be a AAA guy for us. Still says he's looking for a contract, but if he was going for a minor league with major league options, we'd consider it. And he says that's what he would think about. So another guy that I don't mind stashing in AAA. If he opts out after 30 days, kind of no harm, no foul. And a decent amount of these guys end up sticking around for the whole year and give us a little bit of excess depth with 4A type players. So if he would go for $2 million, says he'll think about that. So we'll put an offer out to Smithwick as well. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of my thought process around some of the free agency decisions here at the beginning of spring training. Eric Berry, a 29-year-old third baseman. He's, a 4A guy. If he had some positive personality traits, I wouldn't mind bringing a guy like him on board. I'm just looking quickly here for purposes of this episode. We'll spend some more time on this potentially offline, but not really. Seems like there's a decent amount of first basemen out there who aren't looking for a major league contract, but that's kind of our smallest need. Our old friend Marcelo Meyer is out there. He's got a disruptive personality at this point. Ishmael Madrid, a left fielder, wrecked physically, 28 years old. Does have some good personality traits, does have some speed. I don't know that I'd want to use that batting profile. No home runs and no walks, despite the fact that he's actually pretty good at everything else at the major league level. But again, as a replacement guy with some depth for the organization, he's wrecked physically. But given that he's got some positive personality traits and only positive personality traits, he's the type of guy that I'll throw out a minor league offer to as well. So I won't go through all the gory details of this with you, but hopefully that at least gives you a high level of some of the guys that I think about potentially bringing on board as spring training begins. And we've made it through spring training, no major injuries, fortunately. Unfortunately, our closer, Pat Mems, is day-to-day with a strained forearm, going to impact him for 5 days. But he is not going to be put on the IL. We've still got 3 days until the season starts on April 6th, and then we just will not have him available. 31-year-old is wrecked physically now, so probably not someone we're building around for the long term. He was pretty good with us last year after we picked him up in that trade with Kansas City. Salary got bumped up to over $6 million this year through arbitration, and he's set to make $9 million next year in arbitration, pending on how this season goes. That's kind of borderline for bringing him back in my mind. Certainly a very talented pitcher. We'll see how effective he is this year, but that money may come in handy to attempt to sign Barajas while also keeping our overall payroll responsibilities in a appropriate level. So going to have a lot of interesting decisions on players like Mems and others at the end of this season. But right now we're just hoping that he bounces back from that strained forearm relatively quickly. He will, despite that injury, certainly be part of our 26-man roster. But the big project now is going to be figuring out which 20 players we're going to cut as we get that down to the 26 players who will be headed north to Buffalo. And we've got our pitchers cut down to 15, so we still need 2 more cuts to get to the 13 that were going to come north with us. The first cut here comes down to 2 of the Rule 5 players that we haven't cut yet. We picked 4 pitchers in the Rule 5 draft in December. 2 of them have already been cut. The 2 that are left are Dan Pahauhau and Robbie McCracken. Pahauhau, a 30-year-old, looks like a pretty decent profile for a reliever. Like that he's durable. He has had a little bit of playing time over the course of his career. Although I don't know why. Oh, I'm looking at batting stats. That's why I can't find anything for him. And he's been a slightly below average pitcher in terms of his ERA plus and his FIP minus, and actually slightly below replacement level when all is said and done. But certainly looks like for a back end of the bullpen arm, he could be useful. The other Rule 5 guy that we still have left is Robbie McCracken. He's fragile physically rather than durable, but he is younger, only 24 years old. And with a 4-pitch arsenal and 40 stamina, he could start in a pinch, kind of a 4 to 5 inning type of starter, most likely. Also has some positive personality traits, throws in the mid to high 90s. I don't think either of these guys has a huge role on our team, but with McCracken being just 24 years old and also having some of those positive personality traits and being able to start in a pinch, I think we're going to keep him over Pahauhau. So we will go ahead and release Dan back to the Phillies. And that leaves us with just one cut left to make. Honestly, it could be McCracken, but I'm going to send Mike Waters back to the minors. He's a 25-year-old, a 20th round pick in 2033, less than 4 years ago, who's just had a lot of positive development to get him to the point where he's in a battle to be on the major league roster, and he does have over a year of major league experience at this point. But he's got an option year left. So because of that, we are going to send Waters back down to AAA to allow McCracken to get in the mix of players who could become our property for the longer term. Don't think either of them is going to be getting critical innings for us at the major league level. So Waters, unfortunately, because he has options available, unfortunately for him, ends up sent down. Still will be working out the roles for the bullpen, but Mem's back as our closer, Walborn back as our stopper. Elvin Jimenez is going to be a setup guy. When all is said and done, Vallejo probably a setup guy. McCracken and Yinger, the righties, who are likely to be long relievers. And then the two lefties, Eddie Mosley, who we signed as a free agent, and Matthew Wenzel. You can argue that just in terms of pure stuff and pure talent and pure ratings, that a Mosley or a Wenzel potentially should have been removed from the 26-man roster instead of Waters. But I do like at least having 3 of the 8 arms out of the bullpen being lefties. So that helped ensure that Wenzel and Mosley made the team for the time being. And then looking at our starting rotation, the top 3 the same as it has been for several years at this point, 2.5 plus years, I guess most accurately. Barajas, Shazier, and Estrada. Isidro Ochoa remains our number 5 starter. And Alexis Mendoza, the youngster who's the number 22 prospect in baseball. He's fragile physically, suffered a pretty serious injury, a torn labrum, midway through last year's campaign in Albany. But you look at what his ratings look like at this point, and although he was not dominant in Albany, I see him being our number 4 starter right now. So we are going to give him a chance. He did pretty well in spring training with a 3-0 record, 3.31 ERA. So it seems like he's bounced back from that injury to kind of be who we thought he was before the injury. And I think he could be a pretty high-quality replacement for Jorge Carrillo in that number 4 spot in our rotation. And we've made the easier cuts among our position players now as well, and we still have 2 more cuts to go to get down to 14, including the two-way pitcher Juan Estrada. As I kind of anticipated, our infield is where we're going to have to make the cuts, and Jackson Holliday, who we signed to that minor league contract with major league options, we're going to stash him in AAA. Don't think he is one of our best options at the major league level. If he opts out in a month, kind of is what it is. But we're going to demote him to AAA. Part of the reason we sent him down, and part of the reason that we won't mind if he departs, although we'd certainly love him for organizational depth, is that the other guy we're going to send down is probably as good, if not better, than Holliday at this point, and at 24 years old, we think he can still get better. And that's the first round pick from 6 years ago, Tegan Tiley, out of Canada. Had a below average offensive season in Albany last year, but he's pretty versatile. Looks like he could be a very useful utility infielder for us. We still think he's got a little bit of development as far as his contact, his gap power, and his home run power, and would rather that take place in AAA where he will be playing every day. So we are going to demote him to AAA Albany. These are just the default lineups from our manager, which will likely be switching. But that does get us down to the 14 players that are going to go north with us, who I'll talk about right now. Once again, our catchers are Andres Big Baby Funky Cold Medina and Walt Miller. Medina, interestingly, after the long saga with him, he was an international amateur free agent we signed who didn't live up to his billing in his early years in our minor league system. Traded him to Philadelphia as the cornerstone of a trade that brought us Andrew Painter. Traded back for him a few years ago. And Medina is going to be turning 30 this year, and he's also in his final arbitration eligible year. So he's going to be a free agent this offseason. I've talked about our primary goal bringing back Barajas. But certainly when we talked earlier about whether we want to bring back our closer Pat Mems or not to $9 million arbitration number, what Medina looks like after this season and what we can potentially sign him for and whether we want to bring him back could go a long way into determining whether or not we want to go after Mems. Medina is what he is at this point. But I'm guessing he's still going to be looking for pretty big money. He has $17.4 million a year for 4 years, so that may be a tough contract for us to stomach. Walt Miller, the other catcher, he's actually been getting a bit more playing time over the past few years because we've thought his bat was a little bit better. He still does have another arbitration eligible year next year where he'll probably be making about $6.5 million. If we do move on from Medina, he would be our starter next year. A couple of young right-handed hitting first basemen / DHs in Arturo Flores and Joe Gallagher both make the team. The two of them will be counted on to try to replace some of the offense lost by the departure of Shamar Jenneret. Deshaun Seifu back at second, Joe Edwards back at third, and Steve Anderson and Tim Hull once again going to be platooning at shortstop. And in the case of Hull, since he's only playing shortstop against left-handed pitching, serving as our utility infield. And then turning to the outfielders, we've got 4 guys back: Bolig, Heiner, the 2 lefties that we're counting on to be pretty productive against right-handed pitching this year, both coming off by their standards off years. Hope that they can help fill some of the gap of the loss of Jenneret's offense as well. Gagley and Hardage back as center fielders / utility outfielders, and then the addition of Dylan Carlson, who we signed, actually picked up in a trade with Boston, and we got Boston to keep the most part of that big unwieldy contract of his. We've been training him at right field during spring training. Conceivably, he is in the mix to start as a center fielder for us. Most likely, I would think, against right-handed pitching, given that both Gagley and Hardage are right-handed hitters. But like I said, these lineups don't mean anything right now. This is the default of the AI, which I will likely be overruling. So I can't say there's any real surprises with the 14 position players that we're going to be bringing north with us, including Estrada, to get to that 14. Pretty much the way I anticipated the team would look after we made the trade for Carlson. And honestly, on pitching, the only real surprise is perhaps that Waters didn't make the team because we wanted to keep the Rule 5 guy, McCracken, around in our organization. But other than that, should not be a lot of surprises there. So we are going to begin our title defense in our next episode. Feel like the pitching is going to be just as good as it was last year and just as good as it has been for the last several years, where we've had one of the best pitching staffs in the National League. The question is, how much of a hit is our lineup going to take by the departure of James Wood? I just said that to annoy some of you who are anti-Wood. The departure of James Wood, I'm pretty sure we can overcome. But the departure of the great Shamar Jenneret, who spent 3 years with our team, led the National League in ribbies each year, was an all-star each year. I believe he was a Silver Slugger each year, but we will check on that right now. Yeah, all-star each year with us, Silver Slugger each year with us, led the league in ribbies each year with us, was our team's leading home run hitter each year with us, and was a World Series MVP in 2034, NL MVP in 2035, and World Series MVP in 2036. And he is now a member of the Boston Red Sox because as a team with the 20th highest budget in baseball, we just could not afford to bring him back, given that we wanted to keep Deshaun Seifu in the organization, and we wanted to ensure that we had enough money to potentially bring Barajas back next season. So we wish Jenneret the best. Hopefully we'll be playing against Jenneret in late October, because that'll mean that we're in the World Series, and I guess that means the Red Sox would make it as well. So it's going to be tough for us to generate as much offense without our best hitter from the past few seasons on the roster. But as I said, I like our pitching staff. I like our roster overall. And I think that it's going to be an interesting season. We were very good in spring training once again. We'll see what the predictions look like at the top of our next episode. And in the meantime, I'm going to figure out exactly what I think our starting lineup should be against right and left-handed pitching. Also going to get our minor league organization set up. And then we are going to have the first pitch of the 2037 baseball season at the top of our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.